Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and it's great to have Akash here. You're somebody that has taken on this movement of digital expression and made it accessible for so many to benefit from, and with the highest quality tools and ways to create avatars and things you can put on them. You've done so many different partnerships with Justin Bieber, Rihanna, and you've scaled this out to and put avatar creation and high quality avatar creation really at the forefront of the social media space, and been leading the wave on the type of metaverse of in kind of Web3, well, not even Web3, just metaverse in general that people can benefit from and can be scalable. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So where did your passion for business leadership, entrepreneurship come from? Was it something that you had as a kid? Was there some sort of experience that got you really into, hey, I want to create a business? How did this begin?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Mountain View. And so you're kind of like in the heart of quote unquote Silicon Valley. And I know that sounds kind of cliche, but the truth is there's so many different ideas and culture around starting a business that are transmitted through osmosis, just being around people that think about these ideas that are typically not conventional. And so I used to joke all the time, like I played soccer my entire life, and you could argue at any given time in our lineup that the left forward's mother was this CEO, or that the center back's dad was this VC, or our back right's back, or our back right back was an engineer of some sort working on a really new product. And so you were exposed to it super, super early on. And so when you're exposed to that type of chatter, just people conversing around ideas that, again, they aren't part of like the typical, they're not part of like the typical progression around how to advance your quote unquote career within this governing of society, then I feel like it's just natural for you to start having like the same ideas. And so like early on, we were building different quote unquote businesses, I guess. But like when you think about even like the word business, it's just like a formality of your thoughts. And so like I feel like without incorporating something formal, we were just trying new shit and trying to get other people to try our shit that we were putting out there. Probably when I was in elementary school, and you could like go all the way back to even just like the way that we went about lemonade stands. Like when you're putting out a lemonade stand, like a very traditional way to do it is just like price out 3 cups, go get some lemons, and then just start like, I don't know, it would be like a weekend activity that you could do with your friends. But like what we would do is like we would introduce so many new elements. Like we were trying to make it like almost as like Cornerstone Circus. It was like offering like different, I remember it was like performances. We would like we were trying like different like quote unquote like business models to an extent. It was trying to engage, like we would like price, it's kind of illegal, but like you were like pricing people differently depending on the answers that they were giving you. Like it was just like interesting stuff. So without saying like business, and I think like replacing the word business with just when did you start thinking of ideas, I would say like my friends and myself and all my schoolmates, you're almost like taught without intention to think about new ideas pretty early on, maybe like 3rd or 4th grade.
Mhm. So this is kind of your mindset that you have. You go to college, you go to University of Michigan, and think you wound up dropping out of the school. So you followed in great footsteps, right? Mark Zuckerberg, et cetera, other people that have created tech companies and dropped out. What happened then? Was there a business idea that you had that you wanted to pursue that you felt like this was the way to go and it was already getting traction? Why did you decide to leave, and what were the next steps you took?
Yeah, so like going off and even like your first question, I've been creating different ideas or products from ideas or things from ideas for maybe around, I was like, what, maybe like 20 when I dropped out of school, 2021. So at that point, maybe for like 6, 7 years. And I always used to joke to my parents, at one point during school, I'm just going to drop out. I want to pursue these ideas full time. And they would be like, please don't do that. Obviously, like education is everything. Parents are Indian, if you couldn't tell, and so obviously like education is everything for them, right? So we were kind of like in this high frequency of testing though, and it was good because like by the time I was like 20 years old, even though I had no formal experience on like the quote unquote market, I had a ton of experience just like trying to realize an idea from your imagination into something physical or something that you could at least give to somebody else. And so like I think like when you go through your first initial set of ideas, you're humbled really quickly because typically when somebody has an idea, they're like, oh, or at least like when you're first thinking of ideas that you want to realize into something, you think that they're bulletproof. You're like, oh, this is amazing. This is guaranteed to work. You're drinking the Kool-Aid, especially when you're really young and naive. And I definitely had that phase. But I had that phase when I was in high school, right? So like I went through the process already of like, this is an idea I have. This is guaranteed going to work, and then shipping it and then getting like 2 users. So because we had that, I think, like humility in some regards, and we had been like, humbled through many different launches. The approach was very much with that in mind. It was like, let's test as many different things underneath this like overarching theme that we have, which is around social communication and connection. Let's try different ways to connect people in a new way in video, and now let's try a new way to connect people via text and then photo and so forth, and trying all these different sorts of mediums. Until finally, actually, one day, it was like my junior year, we were coming out with maybe like our 8th experiment at this time. And it was a company called, or not a company, I guess it was an idea called Blend. And it was like a college exclusive social network and so forth. And I went to Michigan. And so, we obviously had like $0 in the bank, and we were trying to figure out like our GTM strategy, I guess. But back then it was just like, how do we get people to use this? We had gone through so many different launches at this point where we launch something, we get like, no exaggeration, like you sacrifice an entire year, an entire summer, you ship it, and you get 6 users, and it's like your mom, your dad, your sister, and so forth, right? And so we've been through a number of those. Like, dude, we need we want like just like 1,000, 10,000 people. So we just came out with this statement saying this is a college exclusive social network, unless you're from Ohio State. So anybody that was downloading that app from Ohio State, because I went to Michigan, we just started deleting their accounts, like one after the next. And sure enough, like it became like the talk of town, like everybody was writing about it and so forth. And we got our first surge of 100,000 users. And so when that happened and we saw some really interesting engaging metrics, that's when I decided to leave. And so like I remember my mom calling me. She was like, Akash, like, she was like literally seeing it in the news. So she was like, Akash, like whatever you do, please, please, please graduate. I was 8 credits away from graduating. And I was like, Mom, don't worry, I got you. And the next day I went to the admin office, withdrew my papers, and then ended up back home.
Wow. So then how did Genies come about? Like how did the idea for Genies come about, and what happened with Blend in the end?
Yeah, so Blend ended up like peaking, I guess you could say, shortly thereafter. So like I dropped out in 2014, and probably around 2017 was when December 8th, 2017 is like when we actually put our first version of a Genie avatar out there in the wild. And so it was probably around like 2016 where we're like Blend has peaked. We had an opportunity to sell the company. It wasn't that interesting, or it wasn't that meaningful. And so the question was really, the question came down to a few different options. It was like, one, do we shut down the company, whatever we had, and go back to school? Do we continue Blend and sell it and then work at this new third party? Or 3, do we keep the team together and pivot into something different? And so we chose path 3. Now, remember, like our overarching theme around like what we want to be able to do is allow people to better express and connect with others. And so all these different ideas were under that theme in mind. And I mentioned a few different mediums of communication beforehand that we were testing within, right? It was like photo, video, and text. But ultimately, we ended up like really falling in love with the concept of avatar as the next form of media, right? And the reason why is because I don't know, I think it was going through like a really interesting phase where like gaming was becoming more interesting. Emojis were having its moment. Bitmoji was coming onto market, and you could kind of see the like trend. And I'm a big believer that like every single generation has a different way that they communicate and they connect depending on the context they were born within. So for example, if you look back at my parents are like, they didn't have the internet. So because they didn't have the internet, they were like, the way that we communicate and the way that we connect is through physical interactions. When I grew up, it was with the internet. And so I sit there, I was like, the way that but I didn't grow up within TikTok. I grew up like right when the internet was coming about, right? So it was like AIM in like middle school days and stuff like that, right? So for me, I was like, just the fact that I can text with my friends, like that allows me to better express myself and also connect with other people, right? Now it's gotten crazy. It's like people are being born within Roblox, getting born within TikTok. They're born within this new realm, this new context. And so the desired means to express and connect have a much higher standard than ours. And so in my opinion, I thought an avatar was a really, really cool culmination of it. It was something that could serve as your emotional surrogate for your thoughts, your feelings, in an artistic way. And it could be an agent that can store a ton of information that could be valuable over time as well.
So how did your first breakthrough for Genies happen? Was it some sort of endorsement that you did that people said, hey, look at the quality here of a genie, look at the quality of the character? Like, what was the first major breakthrough that you had to gain traction?
So December 8th, 2017 was like a really interesting day, because keep in mind, again, like at that point, I'd been through a dozen experiments. And again, the experiments were like myself and one other buddy, and we're building stuff and we're launching it to like our college friends and stuff. And you had like a few that had some glimmer moments, kind of like blend, but nothing that really actually had like skyrocket success. But really fell in love with the power of an avatar and spent a lot of time obsessing around like what an avatar can actually mean to the core human nerve. And we rolled out our take on what avatars could mean to people, not just as like a sticker, not just as like an emoji pack, but really something that can be an extension of your identity. And now like those words sound almost like they've almost lost their meaning, because now everybody says expression of identity and or an extension of your identity. And back then nobody was saying that, right? Like back then when I was talking about avatars, people thought I was talking about the movie Avatar. So it's come a really, really long way. But the release that we had was actually targeted to kids, and kids loved it. And it was like basically your avatar reenacting some of your most memorable moments. It was like our first MVP. And funny enough, even though college kids really, really liked it, it was so strange. I'm trying to remember the exact first moment, but it was like a few different celebrities started hitting our press account saying, we've been seeing these avatars. They're really sexy. They're really cool looking. Can I get one? And I think like the first one was actually like Offset from Migos. We're like, yeah, sure, no problem. Made one for Offset. We kind of thought of it as almost like a marketing tactic, right? Keep in mind, we're like 3-4 people in a WeWork at that point. And so it's not like we had like an infinite amount of resources to chase every single use case. We're like, oh, this is kind of dope. Like, should we just see how somebody's going to use our product in a way that maybe we didn't imagine? And so we made this, we made the avatar for Offset. He posted it on Instagram, and it was like an animation of his avatar doing something that his physical self typically wouldn't do, but it was a way for him to express a different side of his personality. And when he posted it, then you got a DM from Cardi. And you got a DM from Cardi, then we made one for her, and then she posted it, and so forth. And then that's kind of where things started to unravel. And it was funny, like the way the celebrities were using our product was still with the same ethos of how we imagine people would generally use our product, which is using an avatar to express all different sides of their personality, and sometimes in a way that their physical self is incapable or unwilling to do so. And so that's like the first moment, I think, when we're getting a lot of December 8, 2017 is when like a bunch of college kids started downloading the app and started getting really interested in it. But then when we really started scaling was when celebrities started to use it as one of like their main methods to connect with fans in a new and engaging way, and a way to be able to memorialize some of their key life defining moments.
So Offset just basically posted it without, it wasn't like a paid promotion or anything. It was you built this avatar, he liked it, you just posted it.
Yeah, we've literally zero times have we ever done a paid endorsement. We actually have this thing within like the quote unquote marketing department, which is still very, very small, which is pretend like you have $0 in the bank. And you do that so that everybody tries to imagine two things. One, what are things that can be elicited directly from the product itself? So this is like a pretty good example of that, right? It's like, how can we generate marketing through just creating avatars for certain people? And then number two is that it forces you to think of these very unconventional, out of the box ideas that aren't like your typical kind of like lazy paid ads or paid endorsements. I mean, not lazy per se, but at least for like a startup at that age, you don't really want to find yourself in that situation. And so it was very organic and worked quite well for us.
So then you decided to do partnerships with the NFLPA, the NBA, with their Players Association, Universal Music. Like, how impactful were those? Because you did already get some traction, organically from people reaching out. Did that really help take you to a different level?
Yeah, it was a formality. I mean, those partnerships were basically a formality of the traction that we were already experiencing, right? So like in 2019 is when things really started to scale for us. 2020 is when there was like a moment where we had traction from all the key icons and celebrities and artists from UMG and WMG and Sony. And then we also had the same level of traction amongst everybody in the NFL, the MLB, the NBA, and so forth. And when 2020 happened and everybody had to shut down, these I guess like larger incumbents, entities, and labels were looking at how are we going to be able to exercise some of our in-person activities through a virtual format. And many of them obviously sat there and were just like, okay, well, we've seen Genies being exploding amongst our clientele. Is there a way that we can formalize this partnership so that we can realize even more of it? So That's how we ended up signing with like UMG and WMG, and then we also signed with the NFLPA, the MLBPI, and then the NBPA as well.
Mhm. What do you think has led, like from a management standpoint, has led to like really high fidelity, high quality avatars? Because you guys have set the industry standard. Is it just that you've picked really great designers? Is it something operationally you've done? Like, what do you think has led to that type of success and quality?
I think it's like twofold. I think one, understanding that fidelity of an avatar has an impact on how the user wants to use, or which avatar the user wants to use, right? And like we're working on a bunch of stuff right now that makes it so that it's like any art style, any aesthetic, any preference that you have, you can use within Genies, right? So um, the I guess like that concept is, or the concept that you're bringing up is more of a point from the past, but I think like one, to get started at least, it was really important for us to hire the right people that could. I think it's not as much as like designers, but like technical art. So it's like anybody can draw up like a beautiful avatar, but having that avatar scale as 3D, having that avatar scale in a way where a user can design that type of avatar with individual 3D assets is another thing. And then it's another thing to make sure that all those assets can also perform on a phone, right? So it's like it loads performantly, it interacts performantly. Any of the use cases where you want it to load is also performant. So I think it was like one, having a commitment to aesthetic being a priority, and then number two, making sure that we hired the right personnel in order to execute that vision.
What do you think you learned most from having Bob Iger on your board? Was it just you think he gave you management advice, or like maybe it was in terms of creativity, how to lead creative people and to produce new types of products? Like, what do you think he impacted you most with?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, like I never thought of Bob adding value in the context of like Bob Iger. I always thought it in the context of like him as like maybe just like a human. Like when the opportunity first came up for Bob to join our board, um, I was very direct. And I mean, he would tell you this too. I was very direct in the sense of saying, like, look, this is like a really difficult decision because, like, on one hand, your impulse is like, of course, Bob Iger wants to join our board. It's like the first and only thing that he wants to do, like, outside of his time at Disney, and he decided us. So of course, you're like, let me take advantage of this. On the second hand, on the other hand, rather, I was sitting there saying, okay, but I don't know Bob super well yet, and he doesn't know. I mean, he knows us well, but he doesn't know us like super super well. And in order to understand this vision really really well, you need to spend like dozens and dozens, hundred, like literally like multi-hundred hours really diving into this stuff and really understanding um, the nook and cranny of every single like user segmentation, our philosophy for the future, what we want to execute now, and so forth. Hundreds is like, I mean, that's like my perfect case scenario. Obviously, it's somewhat of an exaggeration, but it's like, a lot of time, more than just like, oh yeah, let's like hang out for like 4 different meetings. Now you're going to be on our board. And so like I had a discussion with him and I was like, hey, listen, like, why don't we do this? Instead of you jumping on the board right away, why don't we just make a concerted effort and a plan to get to know each other really well over the next 6 months? And if after the 6 months, one of two things are going to happen. One, you're going to fall more and more in love with the vision. We're going to fall more and more in love with you. And then it makes you joining the board that much better of a decision. And you would have been ramped up to the point where you can actually have huge impact in the business. Or number two, the more you learn about the business, the more you hate the business and the idea, and the more that we learn about you, maybe we don't like you as much and so forth, right? So we both agreed that that was the best process to move forward. And it ended up obviously being the former. And so, like, I guess to answer your question directly, the reason why I'm like giving it that caveat is I didn't view it as, it wasn't transactional. It wasn't like, Bob, like, I've seen that you've done this with Disney. Like, how can you now extrapolate those 3 moves that you did with Disney and apply it to Genies? It was more like, it was almost unsaid. It was like a product and strategy thought partner. There wasn't any one key moment that I can go back to and be like, Bob helped with this moment. It was more of like this unsaid natural partnership. We would talk to each other. He would ask a ton of questions about like some of our road. I mean, like honestly, a lot of it was just product roadmap. It was like, Bob, this is like an idea that this is how we view the future. Are you aligned? And he's seen many, many different cycles of the future throughout his entire career. And so I feel like the questions he was asking, he maybe didn't say, back in Disney, when I was thinking about this, like, this is the question I was trying to answer. It was more of like understanding that because those are the questions he is asking and he's seen the future many, many times, we may want to spend more time in this area understanding the details, or like actually that might bring up like a decent cause for concern. Like let's explore a little bit more what a solution might look like for that aspect that he's asking about. Is that making sense? It was more of this like subconscious thought partnership, or thought partner in many ways.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. I think it's good that you spent, a good amount of time trying to make sure that you're both aligned in what you wanted to create together, and that he was very much on the same page with that. Like, definitely good to spend the time and to make sure that he can really add value, maybe in other ways than just, copying or emulating some of the things he did. Um, so I would say the Apple Vision Pro is planning to come out pretty soon. You're very much focused on communication and new forms of communication with Genies and with almost a digital second self. How do you think that your approach will change, or if not, what do you want to be able to create for platforms like the Apple Vision Pro?
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up, because that's one of the first conversations I had with Bob a few years ago. It was when you're talking about the future, you're making bets for the future. One of our bets is every single identity layer and also internet layer is dictated by its computing device. So we're sitting there and we're talking about what do we think the next computing device is going to look like. And we start talking about when Apple is going to release some type of AR headset or glasses in some form. And in our opinion, we believe an avatar is going to realize its fullest potential in this new format, right? It's not like you're going to show up as like at Ben Wise, a username floating when I have these like headsets on. And you're not going to show up as like a 2D static profile like Instagram or TikTok or Twitter or anything like that. You're going to be immersed into some type of 3D realm. And so what we believe that's going to be is an avatar. And so we made the investment pretty early on to make sure that we were thinking about an avatar in context of XR performance, XR compatibility, and really what does an identity system and layer mean when everybody is wearing these headsets or these glasses. And, even if it's many, many years away from when there's going to be real meaningful adoption, we're taking the gamble that it's inevitably going to happen, right? And so I think like the use cases are more of like, we've come out with a developer kit where we're going to incentivize people, not even incentivize, encourage people to use our avatar system within their social interactive AR experiences. Creating an avatar system can be a lot of work, and creating a good one is even more work, right? And so like we're trying to make all of our tools and all of our components available so that people can create a really interesting experience. And like the way that we talk about it is like an avatar experience is going to be like the mini app of the future, right? So if like we assume that everybody's going to be at one point wearing these headsets, are going to be in a default mixed reality setting, and you can try to think of like, okay, how does I don't know, like take any favorite app that you have, right? It's like, okay, so like what is this game like a basketball game on mobile today? What would it look like if you had to reimagine it in an MR setting? Okay, well, now that you've reimagined that, what role do avatars play in it? Okay, now that we know that, should we leverage Genies as tools to be able to power some of these experiences, right? So it's less about like saying these are the experiences that Genies is going to be launching. It's more of like, how can we know that avatars are going to be a prerequisite in any social interactive MR experience. So how can we break down all the tools and all the assets and all the things and the technology that we've created here into components and accessible sets of features that people can use in the future of the mini apps?
So, based on that, because that's definitely part of your vision, right? The next 5 to 10 years of what you want to do. Like, what are some of your overall goals of what you want to accomplish, let's say by end of 2024, and then as well as within the next 5 to 10 year period?
Yeah. So, the future goal again is like, how do we lay out Genies in a way so that it is one of like it is a primary avatar that you want to use in the future. And a lot of it comes down to how can we nail avatars for consumers? We've been able to quote unquote nail it for people of high notoriety, right? So we talked about the labels, we talked about the sports organizations, but the jury's still out right now on consumers. And we're really excited about the different use cases that we have that we're trying to make available to them this year. And it all stems from our dev kit, right? So like we've come out with a dev kit. It's in early access right now. It's going to be publicly available this year, where people can leverage all the key components that have created some of these use cases that they've seen within Justin Bieber, Rihanna, and so forth that you mentioned earlier on this podcast, and see what types of experiences developers will make with them. A huge focus for us when we're thinking about like what makes the best avatar system or the best identity layer out there is a stress and an emphasis on interoperability and limitless creativity. And so we've been working on two main components around this. One is visual interoperability, and that comes down to our auto rigging via our art platform, our crowdsourced art platform called the Workshop. And number two is behavioral interoperability. And that comes down to data absorption and allowing somebody to be able to use their avatar as a way to learn more about themselves from one place to the next and having an interoperable effect going from one experience to the next. So this year, it's really bringing to life our first party platform that crowdsources all these experiences together called Genies Party, and being able to execute on that and starting to get a good understanding. What do consumers want out of these avatars, and do they view it the same way that we do?
Well, I think that's all the questions that I had. I appreciate you coming on. I'm excited to see the vision fully come to life. I think what you're going to do with Genies Parties is going to be exciting, and take a lot of the different concepts that you've had and really put them together and create something that's an experience for people and that can help attract more of the youth. So really excited to see it come to life and your other creations, and appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.